Right now, this very second, your money is dying, not crashing, not collapsing, dying slowly, silently by design. Every dollar you save is losing value while you sleep. The Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation every single year. They call it price stability. Price stability is a lie, but here is what 2% actually means. Your purchasing power cuts in half every 35 years. That $100 bill in your wallet, give it 3 decades, and it buys what $50 buys today. This is not a glitch. This is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. Today, we are going to trace the money, expose the history, and reveal the mechanism that quietly transfers your wealth into their hands. Every single day, without your permission. The 2% lie. 2%. It sounds harmless, does it not? Just a tiny number, barely noticeable. And that is exactly why they chose it. As the Nobel laureate Milton Friedman warned, inflation is taxation without legislation. The 2% inflation target was not handed down from some economic law of nature. It was invented. New Zealand adopted it first in 1990, and within a decade, every major central bank in the world copied it. They chose 2% because it is slow enough that you never notice. Think about it. If prices jumped 20% overnight, there would be riots in the streets. But 2%, you barely feel it. Your coffee costs a few cents more. Your rent goes up just slightly. Your groceries inch higher. Slow, invisible theft. And that is the genius of it. 2% is the perfect number, big enough to erode your savings, small enough that you never fight back. But this rabbit hole goes deeper than a number. It goes back to a secret meeting on a private island. Born in 1900, in November 1910, 6 men boarded a private train car in New Jersey. They used fake names. They told no one where they were going. Their destination, Jekyll Island, Georgia, a private resort owned by some of the wealthiest families in America. Jekyll Island. Over 9 days, these 6 men, representing roughly 1/4 of the world's wealth at the time, drafted the blueprint for what would become the Federal Reserve. As Ron Paul bluntly put it, the Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. 3 years later, in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law. And from that moment forward, the power to create money shifted from the people's elected representatives to a private institution influenced by bankers. A private institution now controlled America's entire money supply. They were given the authority to print currency, set interest rates, and effectively decide how much your money is worth. But even with this enormous power, there was still one constraint on how much money they could create: gold. And that constraint was about to disappear. The Nixon shock. August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon stepped before television cameras and made an announcement that would reshape the global economy forever. He severed the last link between the US dollar and gold. He called it temporary. It has been over 50 years. Before 1971, every dollar was backed by a fixed amount of gold stored in Fort Knox. The government could not simply print money without having the gold to match it. After 1971, the dollar was backed by nothing but a promise. Nothing. And what happened next? From 1971 to today, the dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. A dollar in 1971 buys what roughly 4 cents buys today. As John Maynard Keynes warned decades earlier, by a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. Once gold was removed from the equation, there was nothing stopping them from printing as much money as they wanted. But who gets that freshly printed money first? That question changes everything. Cantillon effect. In the 1700, an Irish-French economist named Richard Cantillon discovered something that central banks have been trying to bury ever since. New money does not reach everyone at the same time. When the Federal Reserve creates billions of dollars, that money does not magically appear in your bank account. It flows first to the largest banks and financial institutions, then to major corporations, then to wealthy investors. And by the time it trickles down to ordinary workers like you and me, prices have already risen. First in line gets rich. This is called the Cantillon effect. The people closest to the money printer benefit the most. Everyone else pays the cost through higher prices. The system redistributes wealth upward by design. If you are starting to see the pattern here, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide. Because what comes next will make you question every paycheck you have ever received. The wealthy buy assets before prices rise. You buy groceries after they rise. Same economy, completely different experience. And this illusion extends to the very number printed on your paycheck. The wage trap. Here is something your employer will never explain to you. If you received a 3% raise this year and inflation was 3%, you did not get a raise. 0. You got a cost of living adjustment disguised as progress. Your number went up. Your actual buying power stayed completely flat. You are running on a treadmill and calling it a marathon. In 1970, the average American household income was around $9,000 per year. Today, it is over $70,000. That looks like an 800% increase. Impressive, right? But adjusted for inflation, real purchasing power has barely moved in 50 years. Your parents could buy a house on a single income. You can barely afford rent on two. As Henry Ford once observed, it is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Your salary goes up just enough to mask the theft, just enough to keep you grateful, just enough to prevent you from asking the most dangerous question of all: who actually benefits from this system? Who really wins? Follow the money. It always reveals the truth. Follow the money. Who benefits from inflation? First, the government. The United States government is the single largest debtor on the planet, over $34 trillion in debt. Inflation shrinks that debt in real terms. They borrow dollars worth 100 cents and repay them decades later with dollars worth 60 or 70 cents. Inflation is the government's invisible debt eraser. Second, banks benefit enormously. They borrow at near zero rates from the Federal Reserve and lend to you at 6, 7, 8%. That spread is pure profit. Third, asset holders. Stocks, real estate, commodities, they all rise with inflation. If you own assets, inflation is making you wealthier every single year. If you only hold cash, inflation is making you poorer every single day. Notice a pattern. The people who own things get richer. The people who work for wages and save in cash get poorer. This is not a flaw in capitalism. It is a feature of the monetary system. And the biggest winner of all, the largest debtor on the planet. That brings us to the most insidious part of this entire scheme, the debt machine. There is a reason every modern government loves debt. Inflation makes borrowing profitable. Borrow today, repay tomorrow with cheaper dollars. It is the oldest trick in the financial playbook. As the warning often attributed to Thomas Jefferson reminds us, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property. Think about the scale of this. The United States government added over $8 trillion in debt in just 4 years. But they are not worried about paying it back at full value. They know inflation will do the heavy lifting for them. Borrow today, inflate tomorrow. And here is the part that should make you furious. They encourage you to save money in a bank account paying 1% interest, while inflation runs at 3% or higher. Negative return. Your savings account is losing purchasing power every single month. You are literally paying the bank to hold your money while it slowly evaporates. Every dollar saved is a dollar quietly stolen. And this is not just an American game. This is a global playbook that every central bank runs simultaneously. Global playbook. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, they all target 2% inflation. Every single one of them. Every central bank, same target. This is not a coincidence. This is coordination. Through institutions like the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, often called the Central Bank of Central Banks, monetary policy is harmonized across the entire globe. As the famous Rothschild banking dynasty principle states, give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws. In Japan, the yen has lost over 90% of its value since 1950. In the United Kingdom, The pound buys today what 1 penny bought a century ago. Every major currency on Earth is losing value by deliberate design. The European Central Bank printed over 4 trillion euros between 2015 and 2022 alone. 3 different continents, 3 different cultures. One identical policy: devalue the currency, transfer wealth upward, and ensure nobody notices until it is too late. But if you think this can continue forever, history has a brutal warning. History's warning. Every single empire that ever debased its currency followed the exact same trajectory. Rome clipped its coins, mixing cheaper metals into its silver denarii. Within 2 centuries, the silver content dropped from 95% to less than 5%. The Roman Empire collapsed shortly after. Germany's Weimar Republic printed so much money that citizens used banknotes as wallpaper. It was literally cheaper than actual wallpaper. 1. Rome debased its silver. The empire fell. 2. Weimar Germany. Hyperinflation destroyed society. 3. Zimbabwe printed trillion-dollar bills. 4. Venezuela. Currency became completely worthless. As the philosopher George Santayana warned, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Every empire that debased its currency eventually collapsed. The United States dollar has lost 97% of its value since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. 97% gone. The question is not whether this pattern will continue. The question is what you are going to do about it before it is too late. Your next move. So what can you actually do about this? First, understand that this knowledge itself is power. Most people will go their entire lives without understanding how the monetary system truly works. You now know more than 99% of them. Awareness. Second, stop holding excessive cash in savings accounts. An account paying 1% while inflation runs at 3% is a guaranteed loss, year after year. Your money must work harder than inflation erodes it. Cash is a melting asset. Third, own things that appreciate with inflation. Real estate, commodities, equities, precious metals, assets that rise alongside the money supply rather than being destroyed by it. Own assets that inflate instead of holding currency that deflates. Fourth, educate everyone around you. As the economist Murray Rothbard wrote, it is no crime to be ignorant of economics, but it is totally irresponsible to have a loud opinion on economic subjects while remaining in this state of ignorance. Knowledge is the first step. Action is the second, and the clock is ticking on your purchasing power. We started this journey with a simple question: why does your money buy less every single year? And now you know the answer. By design. 2% inflation is not an accident. It is a deliberate policy. A policy that halves your purchasing power every 35 years. A policy designed to benefit governments, banks, and asset holders at the direct expense of workers and savers. This is the greatest silent wealth transfer in human history, and it is happening right now. The pattern is unmistakable. Rome did it. Weimar did it. Every empire in decline does it. And as the great philosopher Voltaire warned centuries ago, paper money eventually returns to its intrinsic value, zero. The question is whether you will sit back and watch your wealth evaporate, or whether you will take action while you still can. If you made it this far, comment "devalued by design" to prove you see the pattern now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about? The truth is out there. You just have to follow the money. Subscribe if you want to keep digging.